Step aside, ma'am. We do not let people like you just walk onto international flights. The words dropped like a stone in water. Conversation stopped. The air around Gate B-24 seemed to freeze. 100 eyes turned, but no one spoke. The woman being addressed looked up, calm, composed. A soft gray hoodie, worn jeans, a small paper cup of coffee in her hand. Nothing about her shouted importance. That was exactly the point. Linda Shaw, the gate agent, leaned forward over the counter, her expression a mixture of authority and disdain. Her badge caught the overhead light. Passenger Service Supervisor. Her tone was clipped, each word sharpened by years of small power gone unchecked. Passport, she said, palm open. The woman handed it over with a small, polite smile. Her fingers were steady. The smile did not reach her eyes. Linda flipped the passport open, glancing from photo to face. She frowned, tilting the booklet toward the light. Her voice rose just enough for people nearby to hear. This photo does not even look like you, she said. You think I cannot tell when someone is using someone else's documents? A ripple moved through the line. A young mother pulled her child closer. A man in a business suit sighed impatiently but did not step forward. The woman in the hoodie stood silent, her coffee cooling in her hand. I can assure you, she said, her tone calm, almost soothing, that is my passport. Linda's lips curled. Sure it is, she said. You know what? Let us make sure. She lifted the passport higher, inspecting the edges like a detective in a movie she was acting out alone. And then, in a single deliberate motion, she tore. The sound was sharp and dry, paper and pride splitting in two. It sliced through the terminal's steady hum of rolling suitcases and boarding announcements. Even the crying baby stopped. Gasps. Someone whispered, Did she just? Pieces of paper fluttered down like snow. The photograph, the seal, the name Dr. Amara Lewis lay shredded on the counter. Linda dropped the torn booklet on the metal surface between them. Now it is definitely invalid, she said. You are not flying anywhere today. Silence, long and heavy. Amara looked down at what had been her passport. The edges curled upward, torn fibers catching the light. Her reflection warped in the shiny countertop split in half like the paper. She blinked once, slowly. The calm in her eyes deepened, darkened. She spoke quietly, but her voice carried. You just destroyed a United States passport. Linda laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. Oh, please. If it was real, it would not tear that easily. Behind her, an older man in line muttered, That was uncalled for. But when Linda shot him a glare, he fell silent again. Amara straightened. No anger, no panic, only clarity. She gathered the pieces of her passport, aligning them neatly, her fingers deliberate. When she looked back up, her eyes met Linda's. Something in the air shifted. The confidence on Linda's face flickered, just for a heartbeat. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we are glad you are here. Now, back to Amara Lewis. Her voice, when she finally spoke again, was calm enough to make everyone nearby lean closer. Ma'am, she said evenly, you may want to call your supervisor before you make this worse. Linda crossed her arms. I am the supervisor. Amara's eyes did not move from hers. Then I hope you are ready for what comes next. The public address system crackled overhead, announcing another flight. The crowd began to murmur again, whispers sliding through the air like wind through glass. But at Gate B-24, time seemed to stop. Amara did not raise her voice. She did not beg. She simply stood there, a woman stripped of paper but not of presence. And somewhere in that silence, the balance of power began to shift. Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport pulsed with the rhythm of morning departures. The smell of coffee, jet fuel, and recycled air mixed in a familiar haze. Gate B-24 buzzed with restless travelers scrolling on phones, pacing, or watching the scene unfold in uneasy silence. Dr. Amara Lewis stood still among them, holding the shredded remains of her passport. To everyone else, she looked like a passenger who had just lost everything. To those who truly understood power, she looked like someone who was calculating her next move. Her disguise had worked. The faded Howard University sweatshirt, the plain sneakers, no jewelry, no designer bag. She looked like an ordinary woman, maybe a teacher, maybe a grad student. No one would have guessed she was an aviation safety inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration. one of only a handful in the country with clearance to shut down an airline with a single phone call. Her cover mission had begun 2 weeks earlier, when the FAA initiated a covert red team audit on Nexus Air. The airline's rapid growth had come with a trail of customer complaints and safety violations buried beneath clever paperwork. The agency wanted eyes on the ground, not numbers on a report. They wanted someone who could feel the culture of the company, someone who could test the system where it mattered most at the human level. That someone was her. Amara had already flagged small irregularities from the moment she entered the terminal. Inattentive security screening, inconsistent baggage checks, and gate agents skipping identification protocols. But this moment at Gate B24, was something different. It was not a simple violation. It was a revelation, a symptom of a culture that believed rules were optional and respect was negotiable. She could have stopped it the second Linda Shaw raised her voice, but she needed to see how far the system would bend before it broke. That was the purpose of her mission, to observe the breaking point. Linda paced behind the counter now, pretending to check her computer, trying to reclaim her authority after the silent standoff. The torn passport still lay on the counter between them like evidence at a crime scene. Her voice came sharp and brittle. "If you are done causing a scene, step aside. You are holding up boarding." Amara's calm did not waver. "I am not the one creating a scene," she said quietly. Linda's jaw tightened. "Do not test me. I can call security." Amara nodded once. "You should." The murmur in the crowd thickened. People began recording. A teenage boy whispered to his mother, "She did not even do anything." The mother shushed him, but her phone camera stayed steady. 20 feet back, a young man in a denim jacket, Marcus Hill, lifted his phone higher. The red recording light blinked like a heartbeat. He had seen the way Linda treated passengers before, snapping, mocking, pushing. But this felt different. This was personal. Linda turned sharply toward him. "Sir, put that phone down." Marcus did not move. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "The world deserves to see this." Her eyes darted between them, the silent woman in front of her, the witness behind his camera, the growing crowd now shifting from passive to watchful. For the first time, the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Her authority no longer filled the room. It leaked out with every second of silence. Amara's voice cut through it, low and measured. "You are very sure of your power, Miss Shaw. You might want to think about where it comes from." Linda scoffed. "From doing my job." Amara took a slow breath, her expression unreadable. "Then you should be very careful about how you define your job." And a falm, for a brief moment, something flickered behind Linda's eyes. Doubt, maybe fear, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She straightened her blazer, lifting her chin. "I have flights to board. You are not one of them." Amara gathered the torn pieces of her passport and placed them neatly on the counter. The act was precise, deliberate. Then she turned, scanning the room with the calm focus of someone who saw every detail. Security cameras, exits, witnesses. Every piece of the puzzle was right where she needed it. From the far corner, a janitor paused, watching. An elderly man, the same one Linda had snapped at earlier, stood with his ticket still in his trembling hand. Eyes filled with something between pity and quiet respect. Around them, travelers whispered, phones glowing, recording, judging. The story was already leaving the gate. Linda spoke again, her voice cracking with false confidence. "If you think standing there makes you important, it does not. You are just another passenger who is not going anywhere." Amara looked at her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile forming. "You are half right," she said softly. She reached into her small canvas bag, not hurriedly, but with the unhurried assurance of someone reclaiming control. Linda took a small step back, her bravado faltering as Amara withdrew her phone. The woman in the hoodie, who had seemed so ordinary just moments ago, now carried herself differently. Her shoulders squared, her silence grew heavy, commanding. The shift was subtle but absolute. The gate had lost its queen. She held the phone at her side, not raised, not threatening. "Miss Shaw," she said, "this gate, this company, this moment, you have no idea what you have just done." Linda rolled her eyes, but her voice wavered. "What are you talking about?" Amara looked down at the screen of her phone. The faint reflection of the torn passport glimmered in the black glass. "Let us just say," she said quietly, "your shift is about to get very complicated." The tension at Gate B24 had become a living thing. It breathed through the crowd, through the hushed voices and uneasy glances. People were no longer boarding a flight. They were watching a confrontation that felt like a mirror held up to something larger. Every minute stretched longer than the last. Linda Shaw stood behind her counter like a monarch, defending a throne made of laminated schedules and laminated pride. Her fingers drummed on the keyboard, even though she was not typing anything. The noise filled the silence she could no longer control. "Security will be here any minute," she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "You can explain yourself to them, ma'am." "Doctor." Amara Lewis remained still, her phone resting on the counter beside the torn passport. The faint reflection of her face in the glass looked steady, unreadable. "I am happy to," she replied. "Please make sure to explain what you did to that document while you are at it." The older man from earlier, the one Linda had mocked about his boarding group, stepped forward a few inches. "She is right," he muttered. "You had no reason to tear that up." Linda turned on him sharply. "Sir, if you interfere, I will have you removed from the gate area as well." The man stopped, lowering his eyes. He looked down at his ticket and stepped back, defeated. That was how it always went. Power did not need to shout when everyone else had learned silence. A low buzz came from the intercom speaker above them. "Attention passengers of Nexus Air Flight 417 to London. Boarding is temporarily delayed. Please remain in the area." The announcement carried the weight of something more than routine. Linda smiled thinly. "Now see what you have caused?" Amara's tone stayed calm. "What I have caused is accountability." The woman at the podium turned red. "Do you people think you can just pull out a phone and make false accusations? You do not even know how airports work." Marcus Hill's voice came from the back, firm but calm. "We know how respect works." His phone was still raised. The red light on the screen blinked steadily, the quiet pulse of documentation. Several passengers now had their cameras up. The tide had turned, subtle but unstoppable. Linda's words bounced off walls that no longer echoed them back. She pointed toward Marcus. "Turn that off right now." "No, ma'am," he said. "Not while you are talking to her like that." Her authority cracked. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Marcus gave a small shrug. "Everyone will in about 5 minutes." The murmur in the terminal thickened into a low current of tension. Travelers began whispering to each other, sending quick messages, live updates, short clips. Information was spreading faster than fear. Amara looked around and saw the ripple of awareness move through the crowd. Every phone raised was a silent act of resistance. She knew what it meant. She had seen it in training sessions, in civil rights case studies, in the long shadow of history. When one person recorded, it was curiosity. When 10 did, it became protection. Linda slammed the counter with her hand. "Enough," she shouted. "This is harassment. You are disrupting my gate." Amara met her gaze, her voice steady as glass. "Your gate?" she said quietly. "Are you sure about that?" For a moment, Linda looked genuinely confused. The question did not make sense to her. She was used to being the highest authority in her small square of carpet and computer screens. But now that authority was shrinking, collapsing under the weight of witnesses and consequence. The first uniformed security officer appeared at the end of the corridor. He moved slowly, assessing. Linda waved him over like a drowning person seeing a lifeboat. "Officer, this woman is refusing to comply with my instructions," she called out, gesturing toward Amara. She presented false identification and became aggressive. The guard stopped halfway, looking between them. The line of passengers behind Amara parted slightly, revealing Marcus's camera still trained on the scene. "Aggressive?" the guard asked carefully. Linda's face flushed. "Yes, she is being difficult." Amara turned her head toward the officer, her calm composure never breaking. "Sir, my passport was torn up by this employee without cause. The evidence is right here on the counter. There are multiple witnesses, and several of them are recording." The officer looked down at the torn document, at the tiny fibers still clinging to the photo page. His expression changed, the shift almost imperceptible. "All right," he said slowly. "Let us keep voices down. I will radio this in." Linda crossed her arms. "You are taking her side?" "I am taking no side," the officer replied. "But I do know that destroying a passport is a federal matter." The words hit like a hammer. Federal matter. The color drained from Linda's face. Amara said nothing. She simply watched, the silence around her more powerful than any argument. The crowd began whispering again, louder this time. Someone muttered, "That is serious." Another voice said, "She messed with the wrong one." Amara picked up the largest fragment of her passport and folded it neatly into a napkin. She slid it into her bag. Every motion was measured, patient, deliberate. The kind of patience that only comes from someone used to being underestimated. Linda tried to recover her confidence, forcing out a brittle laugh. "You people always play the victim card." The officer's head turned sharply. "Ma'am, I would stop talking if I were you." A collective whoosh fell again. Amara looked down for a moment, then met Linda's eyes. "Power does not come from badges or desks," she said quietly. "It comes from integrity, something you cannot laminate." No one spoke. Even the officer looked away, as if the words carried too much weight to stand in their path. The intercom crackled once more. "Nexus Air Management, please report to Gate B-24 immediately." Linda blinked. "Management?" Amara finally allowed herself a faint smile. "Yes," she said. "It seems your help is on the way." Her phone buzzed softly on the counter, its black screen lighting up with a single message that only she could see. A name flashed across it, Director Naomi Price. And with that, the woman who had seemed like an ordinary passenger straightened her shoulders. The mask of anonymity was starting to slip, one quiet breath at a time. The red recording light from Marcus Hill's phone burned like a warning flare in the air above Gate B-24. The crowd had grown into a restless semicircle, every face angled toward the woman in the hoodie and the gate agent who had lost control of her small kingdom. The air was thick with the strange electricity that fills a room just before the truth breaks loose. The security officer still stood between them, his radio pressed to his shoulder, speaking in low tones. Behind him, more airport staff began to appear, drawn by the commotion. Travelers who had once ignored the scene now leaned over barriers, whispering, streaming, sharing. Linda Shaw tried to regain her footing. "All of you need to back away," she barked. "This is a private security matter. Stop filming before I have you all escorted out." No one moved. The red dots on the phone screens multiplied instead, a constellation of witnesses forming above her, each one a digital eye, unblinking. Marcus kept his camera steady, his voice low but clear. "Keep recording," he said to the people near him. "Do not stop. They cannot bury this if we have proof." Linda spun toward him, furious. "You think you are a journalist? You are trespassing on private property." Marcus did not flinch. "I am standing in the same terminal as everyone else, ma'am. You do not get to erase people in public." The crowd murmured in agreement. Someone said quietly, "That woman tore a passport." Another added, "That is a federal crime." The security officer's radio crackled again. "Copy that. Port Authority en route." His eyes flicked toward Amara. Something about her calm made him uneasy. This was no ordinary passenger. Amara's phone buzzed once more. She looked down at the message, just 3 words from Director Naomi Price. "Proceed with protocol." She slid the phone into her bag and took one slow breath. When she looked up again, the calm in her eyes had hardened into purpose. "Officer," she said softly, "may I ask your name?" The man hesitated. "Sergeant Miller." "Sergeant Miller," she said evenly. "You may want to stay close. Things are about to move quickly." Linda scoffed. "What is that supposed to mean? Are you threatening me?" Amara's tone stayed level. "No, ma'am. I'm simply stating a fact." The sergeant looked between them, uncertain. "Ma'am," he said to Linda, "maybe let us just wait for your supervisor." "I am the supervisor," Linda snapped again. Her voice cracked on the last word. A ripple of laughter moved quietly through the crowd. Not cruel, just inevitable. Amara turned slightly, scanning the faces around her. The young mother with the stroller, the businessman pretending not to care, the janitor leaning on his mop, eyes sharp. Each one had become part of the story now, whether they wanted to or not. She took a step closer to the counter, her voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "Do you know what happens when an airline employee destroys a United States passport?" Linda crossed her arms. "I know that fake ones tear easily." Amara's gaze did not waver. "It becomes a federal security incident." The sergeant's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Before Linda could speak, Amara reached into her bag again and pulled out a second phone, this one heavier, encased in matte black metal with a government seal etched into the back. She placed it on the counter beside the torn passport pieces. The crowd collectively leaned forward. Linda blinked, confused. "What is that supposed to be?" Amara pressed a single button. The screen came alive with an encrypted emblem, Federal Aviation Administration. The words glowed in blue and white. "I told you," Amara said quietly. You have no idea what you have just done." For the first time, Linda did not have a reply. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Marcus's camera zoomed in, capturing every detail: the seal, the shattered expression on Linda's face, the disbelief rolling through the crowd. The sergeant spoke first, his voice careful. "Ma'am, are you saying you are with the FAA?" "I am," Amara replied. "Inspector Amara Lewis, Office of Aviation Safety, Federal Aviation Administration." The words landed like a thunderclap. The murmurs turned into gasps. The phones kept recording, the red lights now blinking faster as if reacting to the shock in the air. Linda stepped back, color draining from her face. You cannot be serious. You cannot just pretend to be." "I am not pretending," Amara said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "You tore a federal document belonging to an active inspector conducting an undercover audit of this airline. That is willful destruction of government property." The sergeant lowered his radio slowly. "I need to call this in," he said. "You should," Amara answered. "And you should call Port Authority. This gate is now a secured federal scene." Her words carried authority so absolute that even the ambient noise of the terminal seemed to fade. Somewhere, a flight announcement droned overhead, ignored by everyone. Linda looked around, desperate for backup, for someone to step in and fix the mess she had created. But the only thing surrounding her now were witnesses and the quiet power of a woman she had underestimated. Amara picked up the torn passport again, holding it carefully between her fingers. The edges trembled slightly under the harsh light, like evidence of something much larger than paper. "You said I was not going anywhere," she said softly. "You were right. I am not boarding this flight. But you are not going anywhere either." The sergeant spoke into his radio, his voice firm now. "Confirming federal involvement. Lockdown Gate B-24. Yellow tape appeared within minutes, pulled from the security officer's belt, and stretched across the gate entrance. The crowd murmured, pressing closer. Marcus lowered his phone for a moment, whispering, "She just shut down the gate." Enning, beside him, the older man who had been mocked earlier, smiled faintly. "No," he said. "She just opened the truth." And as the flashing lights of Port Authority vehicles appeared through the glass beyond the boarding bridge, Linda Shaw realized the red dot that had followed her every move was not just a camera, it was a reckoning. The flashing lights outside Gate B-24 painted streaks of red and blue across the polished floor. Travelers pressed closer to the glass partitions, phones raised, recording the moment a quiet standoff turned into a federal scene. Yellow tape now sealed the boarding area like a crime photograph. The hum of the terminal dropped to a low tremor of whispers and curiosity. Sergeant Miller stood near the counter, his hand still hovering over his radio. Port Authority officers approached quickly, the sound of their boots sharp and measured. Linda Shaw's face had lost all color. She stared at the government phone on the counter, the glowing FAA seal staring back at her like an accusation written in light. You cannot do this," she stammered. "This is a misunderstanding." Amara Lewis's tone remained steady, the calm of a person who had stepped into her element. "You tore a federal document in front of dozens of witnesses. The misunderstanding ended the moment you decided to make an example out of me." Linda tried to speak again, but the words failed her. She was trembling, her hands tightening into fists, as if clinging to the last thread of authority she had left. Amara turned slightly toward the nearest officer. "I am Inspector Amara Lewis, Federal Aviation Administration, Office of Aviation Safety. I am invoking a Section 114 violation. The gate is to remain closed until the FAA and Port Authority complete a full incident review." The officer nodded slowly, already lifting his radio to confirm the order. As Amara spoke, her voice remained calm, but inside her chest, something deeper stirred. The sharp, tearing sound of paper still echoed in her mind, the sound of her passport being ripped apart. It was more than paper. It was history repeating itself. For a moment, she was no longer standing in Terminal 4. She was 13 years old again, standing beside her mother at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta. Her mother had dressed carefully for the trip: navy skirt, white blouse, modest jewelry. It had been their first international flight together, but the ticket agent had looked at her mother's passport, then at her brown skin, and said, "Ma'am, this cannot be you. People like you do not fly first class." Amara had watched her mother's hand tremble, not from fear but from fury. She had watched her mother straighten her back, look that agent in the eye, and say, "Then I will not fly with your airline ever again." They had walked away, humiliated but unbroken. That memory burned behind Amara's eyes now. The same kind of woman, the same tone, the same small cruelty delivered with professional indifference. She came back to the present, her heartbeat steady but cold. "Miss Shaw," she said evenly, "you should start thinking carefully about your next words. Everything from this point on is being recorded." Linda's breathing quickened. "I was following procedure," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought the document was fake." "Procedure does not include destroying evidence," Amara replied. "You were not protecting security. You were performing power." The crowd murmured. The truth in her words hung in the air like smoke that no one could wave away. One of the Port Authority officers stepped forward. "Miss Shaw," he said, his voice firm, "I need you to place your hands on the counter. Do not reach for anything." Linda blinked. "Wait, what? You cannot arrest me. I was just doing my job." "This is not an arrest," the officer said. "It is a detainment pending federal review. Please cooperate." She hesitated, looking around for anyone to defend her. Her fellow employees had stepped back. Even the young trainee at the neighboring gate pretended to check his monitor. Amara stood silent, her eyes fixed on the torn passport, the edges still curled upward like a wound that refused to close. For years, she had studied aviation safety, human behavior, and crisis response. She had written reports on mechanical failures and procedural errors, but this was the kind of failure that data could never measure. She thought of every report she had ever filed about cultural deficiencies and training gaps. They always came down to the same truth. Behind every system flaw was a human one. Linda finally placed her trembling hands on the counter. The officer began to read her rights. The terminal seemed to shrink around her, every whisper a needle against her skin. Amara spoke again, her tone not angry but resolute. "You said earlier that I was not going anywhere. You were right about that, Miss Shaw, but neither are you. Not until we finish this." "Who?" A flash from Marcus Hill's camera caught the moment Linda's hands flat on the counter, Amara standing tall beside her, the torn passport between them like a verdict. Marcus whispered to a woman nearby, "She is not yelling. She does not have to. That is power." The woman nodded, her eyes wide. "That is grace." The officers began escorting Linda away from the counter, their voices low, professional, final. She tried to look back at Amara, but the inspector had already turned away, focusing on the larger picture unfolding. She picked up her phone, tapping a short message to Director Naomi Price. "Incident confirmed. Recommend escalation." A reply came seconds later. "Understood. Port Authority and FAA Command notified. You did the right thing." Amara exhaled slowly. The adrenaline was still there, but it did not own her. She looked once more at the counter where her identity had been torn and felt a strange calm wash over her. She knew what would come next. Statements, reports, the machinery of justice grinding forward. But for now, she simply watched as the officers led Linda through the sea of staring faces. A man in line whispered, "That woman just shut down the gate." Another replied, "No, she just opened accountability." Amara gathered her things, slipping the torn passport pieces into an evidence envelope. As she turned toward the window, she caught her reflection in the glass, steady, unflinching, whole, the same reflection her mother had carried decades ago when she refused to bow to indignity. History had repeated itself. Yes, but this time, it would end differently. The gate sat silent, except for the faint buzz of the intercom and the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The crowd that had gathered still lingered behind the yellow tape, unwilling to look away. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had filmed it. Now they waited, unsure whether they had just witnessed a single act of justice or the start of something much larger. Dr. Amara Lewis stood near the counter, her phone still glowing faintly with the FAA emblem. The officers had moved Linda Shaw out of view, escorting her toward the terminal's private security corridor. But the echo of the torn passport and the flash of disbelief in Linda's eyes remained suspended in the air like static that refused to fade. Sergeant Miller returned from the hallway, his radio crackling. "Inspector Lewis," he said carefully, "Port Authority Command is online. They have requested confirmation of your identity and jurisdiction." Amara nodded once. "Understood." He handed her the radio. "Channel 2. She lifted it to her mouth. "This is Dr. Amara Lewis, FAA Office of Aviation Safety. Identification number 53708. I am confirming a code red at Gate B24 under Title 49, Section 146. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. Copy that, Inspector Lewis. FAA command acknowledges Code Red. You are authorized to execute immediate containment protocol. Do you require full suspension of Nexus Air operations at JFK? Amara's eyes scanned the terminal. The passengers still stood frozen in place, unsure if they could leave or if they were part of an unfolding investigation. Not yet, she said. I want to see if their management takes accountability first. Understood. Agents are en route. She handed the radio back to the sergeant, her voice steady. Thank you. Please secure the witness statements. We will need everything. Marcus Hill lowered his phone for the first time in nearly an hour. Ma'am, he said, approaching carefully. If you need the footage, I have it all. From the moment she tore your passport. Amara looked at him with a faint nod. You did the right thing, Mr. Hill. Keep a copy. Evidence disappears faster than paper tears. He smiled nervously. Yes, ma'am, I will. A faint announcement echoed from another gate, a reminder that the rest of the airport was still moving forward, flights still leaving, people still rushing towards somewhere else. But at gate B24, time had slowed into something sacred. A few Nexus Air employees gathered at the edge of the yellow tape, whispering among themselves. One of them, a young trainee with a tablet in hand, stepped forward hesitantly. Dr. Lewis? He asked, his voice small. They are sending Mr. Avery. He is the station manager. Tom Avery, Amara said softly. Good. Within minutes, a tall man in a navy suit approached. His tie was slightly crooked, and sweat glistened on his forehead. He looked like someone who had been summoned from a meeting he did not want to leave. Inspector Lewis, he said, extending a hand. I am Tom Avery, Nexus Air Station Manager. There seems to be some misunderstanding. Amara did not take his hand. There is no misunderstanding, she replied. Your employee destroyed a federal travel document and obstructed an active FAA inspection. That is not a policy error, Mr. Avery. That is negligence. He forced a smile. Let us be reasonable. I am sure we can handle this quietly, internally. Her voice cut through his like steel. You will handle it lawfully, not quietly. The officer standing nearby cleared his throat. Sir, the incident is already federal. It is live across social media. Avery's face tightened. Social media? Marcus raised his phone slightly. 500,000 views, sir? Maybe more by now? Amara kept her gaze fixed on him. You wanted quiet, Mr. Avery, but silence is what created this problem. Avery rubbed his temple, glancing toward the officers. Inspector, can we move this conversation to a private office? This conversation, Amara said calmly, belongs right here, in front of the people who watched your system fail. Her tone carried no anger, only truth, and that made it heavier. The sergeant stepped closer, his hand on his belt. Inspector, Port Authority is requesting the official trigger phrase for full incident lock. Amara took the radio again. This is Inspector Lewis, confirming Code Red under federal oversight. Gate B24 is under FAA containment until further notice. All Nexus Air operations are suspended pending compliance verification. The radio hissed with confirmation. Copy, Inspector. FAA team inbound. Estimated arrival, 4 minutes. The words echoed across the gate. The staff froze. The crowd began murmuring louder now, realizing what had just been said. A national airline had just been shut down by one woman in a gray hoodie. Avery's voice trembled. You cannot just stop flights like this. I can, Amara said, and I just did. The young trainee swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. Sir, she has the authority. Avery's composure cracked. Do you realize what this means? The press will be everywhere in an hour. Amara looked him straight in the eye. Good. Maybe they should be. Behind her, Marcus lifted his camera again, capturing the exchange. The crowd stayed silent, the air so still it felt like a held breath. Amara walked toward the counter, the same place where her passport had been destroyed. The light above flickered, casting a thin line of shadow across her face. She set her phone down again, the FAA seal glowing faintly. This is what happens, she said quietly. When you give small power to people who never learned respect, they think rules protect them, but rules are built to protect the people they harm. Avery tried to interrupt, but her voice overrode his. From this moment, Gate B24 is under federal jurisdiction. You will cooperate fully, or I will have Nexus Air fined for obstruction and non-compliance. Do I make myself clear? Avery nodded quickly. Yes, Inspector. Good, she said. Then let us make this official. The automatic doors to the concourse opened, and two FAA agents entered, their badges flashing under the light. They moved straight toward Amara without hesitation. One handed her a folder. "Inspector Lewis," he said, "Command sent the emergency warrant. We are authorized for full audit." She accepted the folder and turned back to Avery. "Consider this your new boarding pass," she said softly. "Welcome to accountability." The crowd erupted in quiet applause. Not loud, not chaotic, just steady, deliberate, like the sound of justice arriving on schedule. Amara did not smile. She simply nodded once, the same way her mother had decades ago, when she refused to lower her head. Code Red was now official, and Gate B-24 would never be the same again. Within an hour, the video of Gate B-24 had traveled farther than any airplane leaving JFK that day. The red dot from Marcus Hill's camera had become a flood of digital light across millions of screens. The clip was short, barely 30 seconds, but it carried more impact than a press conference. A gate agent tearing a passport, a calm black woman standing her ground, the reveal of the FAA badge. By the time the federal audit team arrived, hashtags had already begun trending: number Gate B-24, number Respect Takes Flight, number Amara Lewis. The entire terminal seemed to buzz with invisible energy, a pulse carried through every phone. Travelers whispered, staff stared, and security officers exchanged uneasy glances, as if realizing history was writing itself right where they stood. Dr. Amara Lewis did not look at her phone. She already knew. The world had seen it, and once the truth had light, it did not go dark again. She stood near the counter, surrounded by FAA officials now cataloging evidence, sealing the torn passport pieces in transparent bags. Her expression stayed calm, but her eyes were focused, determined, unwavering. Tom Avery, the station manager, hovered nearby, his face pale. He had spent the last 30 minutes trying to make calls to corporate headquarters, only to find his access temporarily frozen. The FAA had taken over the gate's communication systems. Nexus Air no longer controlled its own voice inside the terminal. Amara looked up when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Inspector Lewis," the woman said, her tone measured but sharp. "Naomi Price, FAA Director of Operations." Naomi Price strode forward, her posture straight, her expression one of quiet authority. She was known within the agency as the kind of leader who rarely appeared in person unless something had gone very wrong. "Director Price," Amara greeted her with a small nod. "I did not expect you so soon." "You did the right thing," Naomi said. "Once I saw the footage, there was no reason to wait. This is no longer just about one employee. It is about a system that allowed this behavior to grow." Naomi turned to the officers. "Contain the gate and notify Homeland Security. Nexus Air is now under federal review. All operations are suspended, pending compliance verification." Avery stepped forward, his voice shaky. "Director, please, this is an overreaction. One mistake by one person cannot justify—" Naomi's gaze cut him off like a blade. "Mr. Avery, when an airline's employees believe they can tear a citizen's passport in public view and walk away without consequence, it stops being a mistake. It becomes a culture." The words struck harder than any threat. Avery said nothing more. Amara watched as Naomi continued giving instructions, her presence commanding but composed. For the first time in hours, Amara felt the tension inside her chest begin to ease. Justice was no longer a solitary act. It had become collective movement. Marcus Hill stood near the barrier, his phone lowered, eyes wide with disbelief. He whispered to the man beside him, "She really shut the whole company down." The older man replied softly, "No." She opened their eyes. As federal agents took statements from passengers, the crowd began to thin, but no one forgot what they had seen. In every conversation, every retelling, Amara's calm composure became a symbol of strength, a woman who never raised her voice but still changed the tone of the entire room. Naomi approached her again. "Your composure under pressure was remarkable," she said. "Do you know the clip has reached nearly 2 million views already?" Amara allowed herself a faint smile. People recognize injustice when they see it. Cameras just make it harder to pretend it is not there. Naomi nodded. "The Department of Transportation wants a full report by morning. They are calling this the B-24 event. You will lead the internal review." "I understand," Amara said. Naomi placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture both formal and human. "You did not just expose negligence, Amara. You reminded people what authority should look like earned, not abused. As Naomi stepped away to brief another officer, Amara turned toward the window. Outside, a Nexus Airjet sat idle, engines cold, lights blinking faintly. Passengers who had been scheduled to board it now watched from behind the terminal glass, their reflections merging with hers. Her phone buzzed again. Messages poured in from colleagues across the country, inspectors, pilots, even air traffic controllers sending short notes of support. "We saw the video. Proud of you." "About time someone said enough." She read each one carefully, her expression unreadable. It was never about fame. It was about exposure, about peeling back the layers of a system that had long mistaken efficiency for fairness. Behind her, one of the young Nexus Air employees, the same trainee who had called for the manager, approached cautiously. "Dr. Lewis?" he said. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I saw what she did. I should have spoken sooner." Amara turned to him, her voice gentle but firm. "It is never too late to do the right thing. The next time you see something wrong, speak, even if your voice shakes." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Yes, ma'am." From the other side of the security line, a television flickered to life on the wall, tuned to a national news channel. The anchor's voice carried across the terminal. "Breaking news. An FAA inspector has exposed misconduct at John F. Kennedy International Airport. The incident, now known as the Gate B-24 event, is under federal investigation. Amara did not look at the screen. She did not need to see it to know what it meant. The world had taken notice, and silence would no longer protect the careless. Naomi's voice called out from behind her. "Inspector Lewis, I have a conference call with Washington. They want a statement for the public record. Would you like to deliver it yourself?" Amara glanced once more at the idle plane, then back at the crowd of weary travelers still watching her from a distance. "Yes," she said quietly, "but not here. Not yet." Naomi nodded, understanding. "Then when you are ready, we will make sure they listen." Amara gathered her bag, the evidence envelope tucked safely inside. She looked once more at the counter where her passport had been torn and said softly, almost to herself, "She tore a passport, but we just tore down an illusion." The sound of those words seemed to linger in the air, carried by the hum of the terminal and the glow of hundreds of screens. Somewhere, another red light blinked to life. Someone else had started recording again, not out of shock this time, but out of admiration. The story of Gate B-24 was no longer an incident. It was a movement. By the next morning, the name Gate B-24 was on every major news network in the country. What had started as a confrontation at a single boarding gate had become a national conversation about dignity, authority, and accountability. The image of Amara Lewis standing calm beneath the fluorescent light passport torn, expression unshaken, had become the face of integrity under pressure. At Nexus Air's corporate headquarters in Dallas, the atmosphere was chaos disguised as professionalism. Conference rooms filled with attorneys, public relations executives, and nervous board members trying to control a story that had already outrun them. The company's stock had dropped 6% before the markets even opened. In one corner office, Chief Operating Officer Gregory Vaughn slammed his hand on the table. "How did this happen?" he demanded. "How does one gate agent bring down an entire operation overnight?" No one answered. A legal advisor finally spoke up. "It was not just one agent, sir. The FAA is saying this reflects systemic failure. They are calling it a culture of procedural neglect." Vaughn paced the room, his jaw tight. "We need to release a statement immediately, something apologetic but firm. Blame the individual, distance the brand." A communications manager hesitated. "Sir, that may not be enough. The FAA has frozen our JFK operations. We have lost federal clearance pending review. They have full authority now." Vaughn turned sharply. "What about this Inspector Lewis? Can we speak to her?" "Not without clearance," the advisor said. "She is leading the investigation." Vaughn exhaled, the sound sharp. "Then find out what she wants. Whatever it is, give it to her." Back in New York, Amara Lewis sat in a quiet conference room inside the FAA field office overlooking the runways. Outside, planes still took off and landed, but Gate B-24 remained closed, sealed by yellow tape and silence. She watched through the glass as rain began to fall, the streaks tracing downward like a curtain over the chaos. Naomi Price entered the room holding a folder. "They just issued the internal report," she said. "It is bad for Nexus Air." Amara did not look surprised. It was always going to be. Naomi sat down across from her. They are offering a formal apology. They want to meet with you, on record. Amara shook her head slowly. An apology after exposure is not repentance. It is damage control. Naomi studied her for a moment. You are right, but this could force real reform if we handle it carefully. Amara closed the folder without reading it. The system does not change with statements. It changes when people lose the illusion that power protects them. Her words hung in the air, quiet but absolute. Later that afternoon, the FAA issued its official press release. The language was calm, bureaucratic, but the message was devastating. Nexus Air had been placed under full federal audit. All senior management at JFK were suspended pending investigation. The gate agent involved faced criminal charges for destruction of a federal document. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, the company's website crashed from public traffic. Comment sections filled with messages of support, anger, and reflection. The video of Gate B-24 crossed 10 million views before midnight. Back at the terminal, Marcus Hill returned to the scene. The yellow tape still fluttered in the air-conditioned draft. He stood for a long moment, remembering the woman in the hoodie who had changed everything without shouting once. A security guard recognized him. You were the one who filmed it, right? Marcus nodded. Yeah, just happened to be there. The guard looked at the sealed gate and said quietly, You know, they say the air feels different here now. Marcus smiled faintly. Maybe that is what accountability feels like. Across town, in a high-rise boardroom filled with silence, Gregory Vaughn stared at a frozen image of Amara Lewis on a news screen. He leaned back, realizing that no amount of money could repair the damage to reputation or trust. The story had outgrown control. It had become truth. In that same moment, Amara closed her laptop in the quiet of the FAA office. Outside, lightning flashed against the glass, illuminating her reflection. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself a small exhale, a release, not of victory, but of confirmation. The collapse had not been about buildings or profits. It had been about illusion, and now that illusion was gone. The system had finally been forced to look in the mirror. 2 weeks later, the rain had cleared over New York. Gate B-24 reopened under new management, new uniforms, and new rules. The same terminal that once echoed with disbelief now hummed with quiet respect. Travelers passed through without knowing that the ground beneath their steps had been rewritten by one woman's resolve. Inside Nexus Air's new training center, 100 fresh recruits sat in rows, their faces a blend of curiosity and tension. On the large screen before them, a paused frame showed the torn passport, mid-air, frozen in time. Beneath it, bold text read, Integrity is not optional. Dr. Amara Lewis stood at the front of the room. She was not in disguise anymore. The hoodie was gone, replaced by a tailored blazer with the small FAA emblem pinned near her collar. Her posture was calm, her tone even. She did not need to project authority. It lived in her presence. Good morning, she said, her voice filling the space without effort. I am not here to lecture you about policy. You already have manuals for that. I am here to talk about something manuals cannot teach: dignity. The room stayed silent. She gestured toward the image on the screen. This was not about one employee or one incident. It was about a mindset. Somewhere along the line, people started believing that procedure could replace respect, that titles could replace empathy. That is where systems fail. Not in the machines, but in the people who forget what those machines are meant to protect. Her words rolled steady, each one deliberate, each one cutting deeper than the last. When you wear a uniform, she continued, you are not given power. You are given responsibility. Power is loud. Responsibility is quiet. It listens. It learns. It protects. A few trainees shifted in their seats, the weight of her calm voice pressing into the air. She clicked the remote. The next image appeared Linda Shaw being escorted out of Gate B-24. Gasps rippled across the room. Amara did not flinch. This is what happens when arrogance goes unchecked, she said softly. This is what happens when authority forgets its purpose. Remember this image, not as punishment, but as proof. No one falls in a single moment. They erode through smaller moments they thought did not matter. The screen went dark. The only light came from the morning sun filtering through the tall windows. Amara placed the remote down. The world saw a woman's passport torn apart, and for once, they refused to look away. That silence we carry when we witness injustice, it costs more than words ever will. In the back row, Marcus Hill sat quietly, invited as a guest. His phone stayed in his pocket this time. He was not here to record. He was here to remember. Amara looked across the room and met his eyes for a moment. A small nod passed between them, one of recognition, of shared truth. She turned back to the recruits. I did not raise my voice at gate B24. I did not need to. Silence can be power when it comes from clarity. The moment you choose integrity over ego, you will never have to shout to be heard. Her voice lowered, calm and final. So when you leave this room, remember what you represent. Every traveler you meet is someone's mother, someone's brother, someone's child. Treat them as if the world is watching, because now it always is. She paused, letting the weight of that final sentence settle. Then she added, I did not raise my voice. I raised the standard. The trainees began to applaud, slow at first, then building into steady rhythm. Marcus rose from his seat, clapping with them. Amara gave a small nod, gathered her notes, and walked toward the exit. As she reached the door, she glanced back one last time at the blank screen. The reflection that looked back at her was calm, complete, unshaken. The world had changed a little, and that was enough. Outside, a plane lifted from the runway, silver wings catching the morning light. The sound rose, steady and pure, a promise that flight, like justice, only works when balance is respected.